I was standing in the living room of the house I had saved more times than I cared to count. Once when my father had surgery and could not work. Once during the financial crash that devoured half their savings. Once again when the roof nearly caved in during a storm and I wired money before they even thought of asking. That house had always leaned on me like a wounded body leaning on a crutch. That afternoon, I was not there to rescue anything. At least that was what I told myself. I was simply helping my father scan some documents for his health insurance, a small chore he never managed on his own. The printer hummed in its usual tired rhythm, the sound I had come to associate with unpaid bills and forgotten passwords. My father, Harold Washington, believed I was good with technology, though in truth I had spent the last 10 years in project management, not it. Still, for him, I was the one who knew how to fix things. On the kitchen table sat a stack of papers. Medical records, a utility bill, a copy of his Medicare plan. I moved through them with practiced speed, ready to feed each into the scanner when I saw a cream folder tucked neatly at the bottom. The handwriting across the label stopped me cold. Estate plan, final copy. I should not have opened it. I told myself that as my hand slid the folder out, as the paper brushed my fingertips. But just last week, I had wired nearly $3,000 to cover their property tax. I was already planning to pick up their prescriptions later that day. So yes, I opened it. Inside was their will, notarized only 2 months ago, their fully paid-off house, their retirement accounts, a modest life insurance policy. Every bit of it was assigned to my younger brother, Noah Washington, 29 years old, no steady job, still living under the same roof. My name appeared once. One polite sentence. We love both of our children equally and trust them to care for one another. That was all. No mention of the years I had carried them through storms. No recognition of the sacrifices I had folded into my own life until they were nearly invisible. Just a hollow assurance that because I had always survived, I would go on surviving. I remember the exact moment my father walked in with his mug of coffee. The folder was still open in my hands. He stopped halfway through a sip, the coffee trembling slightly. He knew. His sigh told me everything. We figured you would understand, he said quietly. Understand what I wanted to ask, that my entire worth to them was in my reliability, that love could be repaid with omission, but the words tangled in my throat. I set the folder down on the table and walked outside to the porch. The swing creaked beneath me, the one I had replaced 2 summers earlier after the old chain snapped. A cold wind moved through the maple tree in the yard, the same tree Noah had once carved his initials into alongside some girl. I wondered if he even remembered that the trimming bill last year had been $800, a bill I paid without complaint. Sacrifice had become my second language. When I was offered a promotion in Seattle years ago, I turned it down because my mother said she slept better when I was close. When the pandemic ate their savings, I wired $11,000 from mine. They never had to ask, they never had to acknowledge. I was the one who always showed up. The porch swing shifted when my mother came outside. She wore the cardigan I had given her one Christmas, the same year Noah handed her a burned CD. She sat down next to me, twisting the edge of her sleeve. Riley, she said, not sharp, not soft, just heavy. I did not look at her. We did not mean for you to find out this way. I nodded once. My silence pressed against her like a wall. She reached for my hand. You are steady, she whispered. You always have been strong, reliable, words that feel like praise until you realize they are cages. I pulled my hand away. You could have told me, you could have asked. Her eyes drifted to the yard, her voice sinking low. We had to cosine for Noah. He needed help. The words fell like stones. I asked her how much. She said nothing. I asked again. Finally, she said it. $35,000. The wind chime above the porch rattled once, then stilled. I looked at her, not angry, just emptied out. You did not choose him because he needed it. You chose him because you already owed it to him. Her eyes widened, but I was already standing, already walking away. That night, I made my decision. No loud speeches. No confrontations. I simply stopped. I canceled the automatic payments for their utilities. I removed the reminders to refill their medications. I ended the grocery deliveries I had scheduled every Thursday. Nothing dramatic. Just an absence like the silence after a song ends. At first they did not notice. A week passed, then another. I waited, almost curious to see how long it would take before the void caught their attention. By the second week, the first messages began to arrive. My father's text was brief. Water bill came in higher this month. Can you check the account? I left it unanswered. The next day, my mother wrote, We are out of the crackers you always bring. Noah forgot. Again, I left it unread. They thought I was busy, perhaps moody or tired from work. They believed my silence was temporary, the kind that faded once I remembered my place in the routine, but I had not forgotten. I was teaching myself how to breathe without obligation. By the third week, their words shifted tone. My mother's message arrived like a sharp knock. The mortgage is due. Can you send what you usually do? No greeting. No question about how I was. Just the same line, the same demand disguised as tradition. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Ask Noah, it is his house now. 5 minutes later she called. I let the phone ring until it fell silent. Another message arrived. Please do not be like this. We need to talk, but there was nothing left to say. They had made their choice. I was finally living like it mattered. That evening Noah's number flashed on my screen. His words were predictable. Riley, do not make this a big deal. Just help them like always, like reflex. Like background noise, I typed back slowly. You are the one they chose, Noah, so be the choice. I hit send. He never replied. The next morning a transfer request appeared in my inbox from my mother. $3,200, exact amount of the overdue mortgage and penalties. No message, no note, just the number. I declined it. Seconds later my phone rang. Again. Another text. We could lose the house if you do not help us. And then from my father. You would let your parents go homeless? I almost laughed. They were not homeless. They were simply uncomfortable. For the first time in decades, they were experiencing the weight I had carried alone. I turned my phone off. The silence that followed was deafening. A week without messages, a week without demands. I woke each morning lighter. I cooked for myself, shopped for myself, lived for myself. And still, a part of me knew it would not last. Silence never survives in families like mine. The first ripple came from my Aunt Susan. A voicemail, her voice careful, rehearsed. I am not taking sides, honey, but your mom is worried sick. Maybe just talk to them. That was when I knew my parents had started pulling others into the circle. I opened Facebook, the place where private wounds are turned into performance. The first post was from my mother. A picture of the porch, captioned with words that dripped in pity. We gave everything to our children, but sometimes giving is not enough. Dozens of likes, comments of sympathy. Noah added his own voice beneath it. Some people think family is about money. They forget it is about showing up. I closed the app, hollowed out. They were rewriting the story already. In their version, I was not the daughter who had wired thousands to save them. I was the one who had abandoned them, selfish and ungrateful. The next envelope slid under my apartment door. Plain, no return address. Inside, a copy of the foreclosure notice. Not addressed to me, but I knew the number of that house as well as I knew my own heartbeat. I turned the page over and, almost without thinking, scribbled a sentence. Maybe you should have left it to someone who could manage it. I never mailed it. I folded it once, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into a drawer. They had burned through the savings I once believed would keep them secure. They had spent everything trying to maintain an illusion, perhaps hoping I would break first, return to the role of savior. But this time I let the house fall. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at my kitchen table, and listened to the quiet. Sometimes you do not need to set the fire. You only need to stop carrying the water. And so the story began, not with an explosion, but with the silence of a daughter finally stepping back from the edge. The house I had once saved over and over was crumbling. My family was unraveling in public posts and whispered phone calls. And me? For the first time in years, I was breathing without waiting for the next demand. I did not know then how far they would go. I did not know what other secrets were hidden beneath the surface, secrets waiting to break open like fault lines. All I knew was that I had found the will to stop. And in stopping, I had invited everything else to fall. The silence had fooled me for a while. For nearly 2 weeks, I let myself believe it could stretch on forever, that the absence of their voices might settle into something permanent. I almost convinced myself that my parents and my brother had accepted my withdrawal the way you accept bad weather, unwelcome, but tolerable. I should have known better. In my family, silence is never peace. It is simply the pause before the next demand. The first crack came one evening when my phone lit up with my father's name. For 3 rings I stared at it, wondering if I should let it pass. Then some part of me, the obedient daughter I had been trained to be, pressed accept. His voice was sharp, tired, rehearsed. Riley, we need to talk. I waited. He repeated himself, and finally I said, then talk. He cleared his throat. The mortgage is past due. The utilities too. Your mother's medication costs more this month. You cannot just walk away from these things. The words struck me as absurd. I had already walked away. I had already taught myself the strange freedom of not being responsible for their comfort. Yet here he was, speaking as if my absence were temporary, as if I would snap back into place once reminded of my duties. So I asked the question that had burned inside me since the day of the discovery. Why is everything left to Noah? Silence stretched across the line until I thought he might hang up. Then came the sigh I had heard my whole life, the sound that meant I should not expect real answers. "You are doing well, Riley. You have always done well." That phrase again, the excuse wrapped in praise. It translated to "you do not get to want more." It meant you exist to carry weight so others can stumble. I had built my life around those words without realizing how much of myself I had surrendered to them. "So that is all?" I asked. "You think being stable means I do not deserve acknowledgement?" He hesitated. "It is not about deserving. It is about need. Noah needs more support." "We thought you would understand." The call ended soon after. I could hear the weariness in his tone, but not once did he sound guilty. Only resigned, like he believed this arrangement had always been inevitable. The next day, my mother appeared at my apartment without warning. She had never come uninvited before. I opened the door to find her clutching her purse as though it held her courage. She looked small in the hallway light, her cardigan buttoned wrong, her smile brittle. "Please, Riley. We cannot do this without you." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the edge of my couch, her eyes darting around my living room as if she expected judgment to seep from the walls. For a while, she said nothing. Then her words spilled out in a rush. "It is not that we do not love you." I almost laughed, the sound sharp in my throat. "Love that erases my name from your future is not love. You have always been so strong," she said, her voice trembling. "Reliable. We thought you would understand." I wanted to scream. Understand what? That strength is permission to exploit? That reliability means invisibility? Instead, I said, "You could have told me, you could have asked." Her eyes brimmed with tears then. "We had to," she whispered. "We signed for him." I froze. "Signed what?" "We co-signed his loan," she admitted, her words breaking apart. 35,000. I felt the floor tilt. The truth rang louder than any accusation. They had not simply chosen him over me. They had bound themselves to him with numbers and signatures, debts that chained their future to his failures. And to cover the weight of that choice, they had erased me. The room was quiet except for the hum of my refrigerator. I walked to the window, pressed my palm against the glass as if the cold might steady me. "You did not choose Noah because he needed it," I said finally. "You chose him because you already owed it to him." She flinched, but I was not searching for her reaction. The revelation was the first real twist in this story, one I had not prepared for. It was not favoritism, not even blind loyalty. It was desperation. And in their desperation, they had rewritten me out of their lives. I opened the door and waited. She stood, her purse clutched tight against her chest, and walked past me without a word. When the door shut behind her, my apartment felt both heavier and lighter, as if a storm had passed but left the air too thick to breathe. The messages came again the next morning. Noah tried first, his tone casual, almost mocking. "Riley, it is not a big deal. Just help out until we figure things out." Figure what out? That he would miraculously become the kind of man who paid his own bills, that my parents would wake up and admit steady does not mean disposable. I wanted to ask, but I did not reply. Social media carried their next wave of pressure. My mother posted a picture of the porch with a caption dripping in martyrdom. "We gave everything to our children, but sometimes giving is not enough." Comments and hearts piled up quickly. "You two are such wonderful parents, you deserve better." Then Noah's words appeared beneath it like a dagger. "Some people only care when there is money involved. Family is about showing up." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. In their story, I was already the villain, the daughter who had abandoned them. The selfish one, the one who had taken everything but given nothing. The truth was erased in real time, overwritten by need and performance. I closed the app, set the phone face down, and sat in the dark of my apartment. Their story had no room for me as I really was. And I realized, for the first time in my life, I did not care to fight for a place in it. The storm gathered quickly after that. Within days, my father added his own post. It was longer, less subtle than my mother. "We gave everything to our children," he wrote. "Time, money, love. We thought we raised them right, but in the end, you cannot control who turns their back on you." And he tagged me. No call, no private message, just a public declaration, an invitation for others to weigh in. The comments rolled in faster than I could read. Friends from their church, old neighbors, relatives I had not spoken to in years. Most of them offered sympathy, but laced within it were sharp little barbs directed at me. One line stood out like a slap. "This generation just does not understand sacrifice." As if I had not spent half my life sacrificing quietly, I tried to ignore it. I cooked myself dinner. I answered work emails. But the notifications kept buzzing, each one another stone piled onto my chest. Eventually, I turned my phone off and sat in the silence, trying to remind myself that their story was not the truth. But the truth, I was learning, rarely mattered once the narrative took hold. Noah, of course, could not resist adding fuel. He shared my father's post with a caption of his own. Some people only care when they are getting something. I would give anything to protect mom and dad. I guess not everyone sees family that way. The comments under his post were worse. You are such a good son. Your sister should be ashamed. They gave her everything and she just wanted more. The words stung not because they were true, but because they were so easily believed. It was as if the years I had spent carrying this family had been erased in a single click, replaced with a version where Noah was the devoted son and I was the greedy daughter. I might have stayed silent. I might have let the storm pass. But then I saw her name, Rachel, my cousin, the one who once told me I was the glue that held the family together. She had liked Noah's post, left a heart emoji beneath it. No words, just that little red heart. It should have been nothing. But it hit harder than I expected. Maybe because I thought she knew better. Maybe because I thought she saw me. That night, for the first time in weeks, I cried. Not the loud kind, not sobs, just quiet tears that slipped down my face while I sat in the dark, because it was not just my parents rewriting the story now. It was spreading outward, reshaping how everyone else saw me. They were erasing me in real time. A few days later came the knock I had been dreading. Not on my apartment door, but at my office. My phone buzzed with a call from the front desk. Miss Washington, your parents are here, and a man who says he is your brother. I stood in the hallway, the sterile tiles beneath my feet, listening as the receptionist explained they were waiting in the lobby. My chest tightened. They had brought the fight into my world now, the place I had built outside of them. Please tell them I am not available, I said, my voice steady. A pause. They said they will wait. Then let them, I replied. For nearly an hour they lingered downstairs. I tried to focus on my work, but the thought of them waiting, rehearsing their lines, gnawed at me. Eventually, I closed my laptop and headed down. They were there just as I pictured. My mother clutching her purse like a lifeline, my father standing stiff with his hands on his hips, Noah slouched beside them like a reluctant accomplice. When they saw me, they straightened, ready for the confrontation. Riley, my mother began, we need to talk. I crossed my arms, keeping my voice calm. About what? About how you wrote me out? About how you chose Noah because you were already chained to his debt. My father stepped forward, his jaw tight. You would really let us lose the house over this? I let the question hang in the air before answering. You really thought I would not? The silence that followed was thick. My mother's lip trembled. We thought you would understand. You have always been strong. I nodded slowly. You used that as an excuse to forget me. Noah muttered something then. I did not catch it all, only fragments about not asking for any of this. But you took it, I said sharply. He looked away. My father's eyes hardened. We fed you, raised you. You owe us something. The words cut, but I found myself almost laughing. I paid that debt every month, every year, and you erased me anyway. They stared at me then, the three people who once called themselves my family. I had been their rescuer, their safety net, their invisible labor. And now, stripped of that role, I was nothing but a villain to them. I did not shout. I did not cry. I simply said, you are not coming up. You are not coming in. I will not be your answer this time. And with that, I turned and walked back inside, leaving them on the sidewalk. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind tearing at me from all sides. After that day at my office, I knew something in me had shifted for good. It was not the kind of change that came with fireworks or epiphanies. It was quieter, heavier. Like a door had finally closed inside me, one I had spent years trying to keep propped open. For the first time in my life, I did not feel the pull to fix things. I did not run numbers in my head, did not scan my bank account for what I could rearrange, did not imagine strategies for rescuing them from the consequences they had chosen. Instead, I let the silence grow roots. I started with the small things. I deleted the calendar reminder that used to ping me every Wednesday about my parents' prescriptions. I canceled the grocery delivery account I had been funding for months, the one that dropped bags of food on their porch every Thursday afternoon. I had thought I was being efficient, that I was saving them from stress. Really, I was saving them from responsibility. I even paused the automatic transfers I had once set up for their utilities. It felt strange at first, watching the dates roll by without the usual deductions from my account. But there was also a dark relief in it, like unhooking myself from a machine that had been draining me without pause. At first, they did not seem to notice. Or maybe they noticed and chose to believe it was temporary. A week passed in silence. Then, too, my father sent a message about the water bill, casual, as though it were a mistake I would rush to fix. My mother wrote about crackers I used to buy, pretending it was a simple oversight. I ignored both. The third week, the silence broke. "The mortgage is due," my mother texted. "Can you send what you usually do?" It was not phrased as a question, not even as a plea. It was expectation dressed as routine. I stared at the words for a long time before typing back, "Ask Noah. It is his house now." For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then my phone buzzed again. A call this time. I let it ring until it stopped. Seconds later, another message appeared. "Please do not be like this. We need to talk." But there was nothing left to talk about. They had erased me from their future, and I was finally beginning to live as if that erasure mattered. That night, Noah finally reached out. His message was as lazy as it was cruel. "Riley, do not make this a big deal. Just help them like always. Like always. Like habit. Like obligation. Like I was a reflex, not a person." I typed back, "You are the one they chose, Noah, so be the choice." He did not respond. The next morning came the transfer request. $3,200, the exact amount of the overdue mortgage and penalties. No note, no apology, just numbers. I declined it. Less than a minute later, my phone rang. Then again. Then a message from my mother, "We could lose the house if you do not help us." And from my father, "You would let your parents go homeless." I almost laughed. They were not homeless. They were just uncomfortable, for once forced to face the reality I had been shielding them from for years. I powered my phone down and left it face down on the table. The silence that followed was different this time. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of finality. In that space, I found something I had not expected. Rest. I woke the next morning without the weight of dread pressing on my chest. I drank coffee slowly, let the steam rise in the quiet of my kitchen. I cooked meals for myself without doubling the recipe to leave leftovers in their fridge. I even went for a walk, something I had not done in months, the kind of walk without purpose except to feel my own legs carrying me forward. But silence in my family is never the end. It is always the prelude to a new tactic. The first sign came in the form of a voicemail from Aunt Susan, the relative who had always sworn she stayed out of family business. Her voice was careful, almost apologetic. "I am not taking sides, honey, but your mom is worried sick. Maybe just talk to them." That was how I knew they had started enlisting others. They could not reach me directly, so they reached sideways, pulling anyone who might carry the guilt I refused to bear. Later that night, I checked Facebook. I should not have, but I did. And there it was. A photo of my parents' porch, my mother's words pinned above it like a banner. "We gave everything to our children, but sometimes giving is not enough." The comments beneath were predictable. "So sorry you are going through this. You are such wonderful parents. You do not deserve this." And then, of course, Noah's contribution. "Some people only care when there is money involved. Family is about showing up." Dozens of likes, heart emojis. Sympathy pouring in for the people who had drained me for years without pause. I closed the app, my hands trembling, not with anger but with something colder. Hollowness. I was no longer just absent. I was being recast, rewritten into a villain in the very story I had once kept alive. The days that followed felt like walking through a distorted mirror. Everywhere I turned, my reflection was bent into something I did not recognize. My parents' words, Noah's sly comments, the sympathetic replies from extended family, they all painted me as someone cold, selfish, ungrateful. It was as though the years I had spent sacrificing had been erased in one sweep, replaced by a caricature of a daughter who had abandoned her parents for no reason but greed. I tried to remind myself of the truth. The late nights I stayed up balancing their accounts. The thousands I had wired without hesitation. The job offers I had turned down to remain close. The countless errands, groceries, medications, repairs, that I had folded into my routine until I no longer thought of them as separate from my own life. None of that mattered now. The only story being told was the one they wanted others to believe. One afternoon, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my apartment door. Plain, no return address. Inside, a photocopy of a foreclosure notice. The house number was printed at the top, the house I had once saved 3 times over. I stared at the paper for a long while, then flipped it over and scribbled words that came without thinking. "Maybe you should have left it to someone who could manage it." I never mailed it. I folded it back into the envelope and pushed it deep into a drawer, as if burying it would help me bury the ache in my chest. They had burned through the last of their savings, probably trying to hold the illusion together, maybe hoping I would cave before reality came crashing down. But I did not cave. Not this time. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at my kitchen table, and let the house fall without me. Sometimes you do not need to set the fire. You only need to stop carrying the water. At first, the public shaming was subtle. a vague post from my mother with a daisy emoji, a caption about how love was sometimes not enough. Friends responded with hearts and soft words, none of them asking for details because they did not want the mess of truth. Then my father grew bolder. "We gave everything to our children," he wrote. "Time, money, love. We thought we raised them right, but you cannot control who turns their back on you." This time he tagged me directly. The comments came fast and furious. Old neighbors from the block where I grew up. Friends from church who remembered me only as the girl who played piano at Christmas. Even coworkers from his office days. They lined up to praise his dedication, to lament the tragedy of children who no longer valued family. One line caught my eye and would not leave me. "You deserve better parents than that girl gave you." That girl. As if I had been reduced to a headline, stripped of my name, my history, my sacrifices. And then, inevitably, Noah joined in. He shared my father's post with his own flourish. "Some people only care when they are getting something. I would give anything to protect mom and dad. I guess not everyone sees family that way." I read the words twice, then again. I thought about the rent he had never paid, the loans he had defaulted on, the hours he had wasted in the basement pretending his half-hearted photography was a career. He had drained every drop of stability from my parents, yet now he was being celebrated as the good son, the one who understood loyalty. The comments under his post stung worse than the post itself. "You are such a wonderful son. Your sister should be ashamed. Family is about sacrifice, and you clearly understand that." I might have endured all of it in silence. I might have convinced myself it would blow over. But then I saw Rachel's name. My cousin, the one who had once told me I was the glue in this family. She had liked Noah's post, left a heart emoji beneath it. No comment, just that. It should not have mattered. But it did, because I had believed she saw me. And now, with one small gesture, she had chosen to see me only through the story my parents and Noah had written. That night, I sat in my darkened apartment and felt something inside me break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, final click like a lock sliding shut. They were not just rewriting the story anymore. They were erasing me from it. The next morning, I walked to work in a strange kind of calm. The sun was sharp in the sky, the air crisp against my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I did not reach for it. I already knew what the messages would say. Please disguised as guilt. Demands dressed up as love. I let them pile up unanswered. For years, I had lived as if my worth depended on the role I played in their lives. Now I was beginning to understand something different. My worth was not measured by how much I could give or how much I could endure. My worth was mine alone, and so I withdrew further, not with anger, not even with sorrow, just with a clarity I had never allowed myself before. The house could crumble. The bills could pile up. The story could twist and turn until I was painted as a villain. None of it mattered, because for the first time in my life, I was learning how to live without carrying the weight of everyone else's failures. And that, I realized, was the truest form of freedom I had ever known. Pressure has a way of changing shape. When pleas and guilt no longer worked, my family reshaped their efforts into something sharper, more public, more dangerous. What had once been quiet texts and late-night calls turned into campaigns played out in the open, where an audience could be gathered to amplify their story. It began with Facebook, but soon spilled into every corner of my extended family. My aunts, my uncles, even cousins who had not spoken to me in years, all began reaching out. Some messages were soft, dripping in faux concern. "Honey, your mom is heartbroken, just call her." Others were blunt. "I cannot believe you are doing this to your parents after everything they gave you." I scrolled through the words at night, sitting on the edge of my bed, my phone glowing like a spotlight against my face. It felt surreal, watching people I barely knew pass judgment on me as though they had been witnesses to my entire life. They had not seen the nights I stayed up balancing my parents' accounts, the endless errands I ran, the sacrifices I made. All they saw now was the performance my parents and Noah had staged. The performance grew bolder with every passing day. My father wrote longer posts, weaving a narrative where he and my mother were tragic heroes, victims of a daughter's cold indifference. Noah commented beneath each one, his words casting me as selfish, greedy, ungrateful. And the audience lapped it up, eager for the drama, eager to believe the simplest version of the story. I tried ignoring it, but ignoring only made their voices louder. Soon, screenshots of their posts began landing in my work inbox, sent anonymously, as if to warn me that my reputation was being shredded outside the family too. For a while, I worried my coworkers would stumble across it, that my career would be stained by their lies. But then I realized something important. My life outside them was intact. My boss still valued my work. My friends still invited me out. The storm was contained only where they could control it. That realization gave me strength. But the pressure kept building. Noah especially became relentless. He sent message after message, each one a variation on the same theme. This is not that big a deal, just step in for now. You always fix things, do not let them lose everything. His words had a rhythm of familiarity. They were the same lines he had always used, the same lazy entitlement wrapped in a plea. I ignored him at first, but eventually I responded once, clear and sharp. You are the one they chose, Noah, be the choice. The silence that followed was almost satisfying. Almost, but pressure does not dissolve when you refuse it. It hardens. The next wave came not online, not through texts, but in person. I was walking home from work one evening when I noticed a car idling across the street from my apartment building. At first I thought nothing of it, but when the window rolled down and I saw my mother's face, pale and drawn, my stomach tightened. My father was in the driver's seat. Noah slouched in the back, his eyes darting anywhere but me. Riley, my mother called softly, please just talk to us. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my bag heavy on my shoulder. The air felt cold even though the evening was warm. I did not move closer. I did not invite them up. You cannot ignore us forever, my father said. His tone was clipped, impatient, more threat than plea. I lifted my chin. Watch me. And then I walked past them, my key already in my hand, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I heard my mother's voice breaking behind me, begging me to stop, but I did not turn around. Upstairs, in the safety of my apartment, I pressed my back to the door and closed my eyes. My hands were shaking, but underneath the tremor was something new. Resolve. They had brought the battle to my doorstep now, parading their desperation like a banner. They wanted me to bend. They wanted me to see their collapse and step in as I always had, but I would not. Still, their presence lingered in the air, a constant reminder that they would not stop until something finally snapped. And I knew, deep down, the snapping point was coming. The confrontation outside my building was only the beginning. In the days that followed, the pressure became more coordinated, almost rehearsed, as though my family had created a strategy to wear me down. My phone buzzed constantly. Long texts from my father that swung between anger and guilt. You would let your own parents be humiliated like this? You think you are better than the people who raised you? Then, hours later, softer lines that felt almost rehearsed. We just want to understand you. We love you, Riley. Come home. My mother's messages carried a different tone, one of fragility, as if she hoped weakness would bend me. I have not been sleeping. I am so worried. Please, please, do not make us go through this alone. And Noah, of course, kept chiming in. His words were blunt, impatient, stripped of all subtlety. Stop being dramatic. Just fix it like you always do. I learned to silence my phone, to leave it in another room while I worked or cooked dinner or tried to sleep. But the messages piled up like snow against a door, pressing, heavy, suffocating. The social media posts grew darker too. One evening, scrolling despite myself, I found a picture of the house with the caption, "We built our lives for our children, but sometimes children forget who gave them everything." This time my father tagged not only me but several family members, ensuring the story spread even further. The comments were vicious. I cannot imagine treating my parents that way. Some people just do not appreciate sacrifice. Family should come first. I wanted to type back, to spill the truth in raw detail, the loans, the costing, the endless years of sacrifice, but I stopped myself. They would not believe me. They did not want the truth. They wanted a villain, and I had already been cast in that role. The hardest part was not the comments from strangers or distant relatives. It was the quiet betrayals from people I once trusted. A friend of my mother's whom I had known since childhood posted beneath one of the updates, "Riley always seemed so independent, but I guess independence can turn into selfishness." That line haunted me. Independent as selfish, strong as cold, reliable as disposable. It was the same translation my parents had always used, only now echoed by others, amplified until it rang like a chorus. One Friday evening, after a long week at work, I walked past a cafe near my office and froze. Through the window, I saw Noah sitting with two of my cousins. He was leaning forward, gesturing animatedly, his voice carrying just enough through the glass for me to catch fragments. She just walked away, left them with nothing. I am the only one trying to hold it all together. I did not go inside. I did not confront him. I simply kept walking, my steps heavy, my throat tight. They were building their case everywhere, shaping me into something unrecognizable in the eyes of anyone who would listen. At night, I lay in bed and thought about the irony. For years, I had been invisible in my family's story. Now, I was visible only as the villain. The pressure reached its peak one morning when I arrived at work to find an envelope waiting on my desk. No name on the outside, just my office address scrawled in shaky handwriting. Inside was a copy of the foreclosure notice again, but this time, in red marker across the top, were the words, "This is your fault." I sat there staring at it, my pulse pounding in my ears. For a moment, I felt the old panic rising, the instinct to fix it, to step in, to do whatever it took to erase that accusation. But then I forced myself to breathe. It was not my fault. It had never been my fault. They had chosen Noah. They had signed the loans. They had rewritten the will. They had turned me into a footnote. And now, when the house was collapsing, they wanted to pretend the burden was mine. But I refused. That night, I went for a walk through my neighborhood. The air was cool, the streets quiet. For the first time in months, I felt a strange calm spreading through me. They could keep pushing, keep posting, keep twisting the story until even my own reflection felt foreign. But I knew the truth, and the truth was enough to keep me standing. Still, I could sense the storm building toward something larger, something final. Families like mine do not stop when their first attempts fail. They escalate. They push harder. And deep down, I knew the escalation was coming. The pressure had not broken me yet, but it was far from over. I should have known they would come in person again. Texts had failed, calls had failed, social media had failed to bring me back into orbit. And when desperation hardens into panic, there is only one move left: to confront face to face, to demand obedience with bodies and voices that cannot be muted. It happened on a Thursday morning. I was halfway through a meeting when the receptionist called my office line. "Miss Washington, your parents are here, and a man who says he is your brother." For a moment, I just stared at the phone, the hum of my colleagues' voices fading. The receptionist repeated herself, slower this time. "They say it is urgent. They are in the lobby." I told her to let them wait. My voice did not shake, and wait they did. For nearly an hour, they sat downstairs while I finished my meeting, answered emails, even reviewed a project plan as if nothing unusual was happening. My hands were steady. My breath was not. Finally, I closed my laptop and headed down. The three of them were by the entrance, standing together in a way that felt staged. My father stiff and upright, his jaw set as if he were holding in a lecture. My mother clutching her purse with both hands, her eyes darting around the lobby. Noah leaning against the wall, restless like he wanted to be anywhere else. When they saw me, my mother's face crumpled with relief and fear. "Riley, please, we need to talk." I did not move closer. I folded my arms and stayed where I was. "About what?" My father cleared his throat. "You would really let us lose the house over this?" I let the question sit before answering. "You really thought I would?" His eyes narrowed. "We raised you. We gave you everything. You owe us." The words might once have pierced me. But now they sounded hollow, like an old recording played too many times. I shook my head slowly. "I already paid that debt. Every month, every year, and you erased me anyway." My mother stepped forward, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "We thought you would understand. You have always been strong." I almost laughed. "You used that as an excuse to forget me." Noah muttered something under his breath. I caught only fragments, about not asking for any of this, about being dragged into it. "But you took it," I said sharply. He looked away, his jaw tightening. For a moment we all stood there in silence, the four of us locked in a tableau of accusation and denial. Then my father shifted, his hand sliding into his coat pocket. He pulled out a folded document and held it toward me. "Fine, you want the truth? Here." I hesitated before taking it. The paper was worn, the ink faded in places, but the words were clear enough. Loan agreement. Co-signed. Borrower, Noah Washington. Co-signer, Riley Washington. My stomach lurched. I read it again, slower this time, as though my eyes might be deceiving me. My name, my information, my signature, except I had never signed it. The edges of the room seemed to blur. I looked up at them, my hands trembling around the paper. "What is this?" My father's face was tight, his voice defensive. "We did what we had to do. He needed help. You were always helping anyway. This was just making it official." My mother whispered, "Please, Riley. We did not want to burden you with the details." "Burden me?" My voice cracked. "You used my name, my credit, my future, without telling me, without asking." The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. This was the real betrayal, the rot at the core of everything. It was not just about favoritism. It was not even about debt. It was theft. It was the deliberate erasure of my consent, the final proof that to them I was not a daughter but a resource, something to be used until it was empty. I folded the paper slowly, deliberately, as if the act might hold my shaking hand still. Then I looked at each of them in turn. "You did not just erase me from your will," I said. You erased my right to choose. Neither of them answered. My mother's eyes filled with tears, my father's jaw tightened. Noah stared at the floor. I slipped the paper into my bag, turned on my heel, and walked back upstairs without another word. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice break into a sob. My father called my name once, sharp, commanding, but I did not stop. I could not. Because in that moment, the final illusion had shattered, and what remained was not family, it was betrayal. I walked back into the elevator with my bag pressed against my side, the forged loan papers burning in my mind like a brand. The ride to the upper floor felt endless, the fluorescent lights humming above me as if they knew the secret too. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the quiet hallway and forced myself to breathe. Back at my desk, I locked the paper in the bottom drawer. For a while I just sat there, staring at the computer screen without seeing it. The betrayal replayed itself over and over in my head. My name, my signature, my life, stolen, forged, twisted into chains I had never agreed to wear. I thought of the years I had spent protecting them. The job in Seattle I turned down. The money I had funneled into their bills. The endless sacrifices, each one made under the illusion that love was mutual, that loyalty was shared. But this was not sacrifice. This was theft disguised as family. By the time I left work that evening, the anger had hardened into something else. Resolve. Outside, the air was cool, the sky streaked with the deep blues of early night. I walked slowly through the city, my phone buzzing again and again in my pocket. I did not check it. I knew the messages would range from apologies to accusations, from guilt to rage, the same cycle I had lived through too many times already. I let the phone buzz until it went quiet. At home, I poured a glass of water and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the blank wall across from me. For the first time, I felt no pull to explain myself, no desire to defend my choices. They had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. It was not just about fairness anymore. It was about trust. And trust, once broken this way, does not heal. That night, sleep came in fragments. I woke again and again, the image of my name on that loan flashing behind my eyes. In one dream, I was back at the family house, trying to hold up the roof with my bare hands as it collapsed around me. Noah stood watching, my parents behind him, their faces blank. When I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat. The next morning, I decided, I would not answer their calls. I would not open their emails. And if they showed up again, I would not let them pass the lobby. I had thought the will was the worst betrayal. I had been wrong. The will was erasure. The forged loan was violation. Together, they were proof that my family had not just forgotten me, they had consumed me. A week passed. The foreclosure process accelerated, the notices more urgent now. My father posted a photo of the house, captioned with another plea for sympathy. Some people abandon their parents when they are needed most. We never thought our daughter would be one of them. This time, he tagged me directly again. Dozens of relatives commented, each one another blow. I could almost hear them whispering behind screens, rewriting my life in real time. Noah added his own line, I wish you would just do the right thing. But their words no longer cut the way they once had. They landed dull, powerless. Because I finally understood something crucial, they could only wound me if I cared about their version of the story. And I did not. Not anymore. On Saturday, I walked past the house for the first time in months. The shutters were peeling, the lawn overgrown. A foreclosure notice was nailed to the front door. My chest tightened, but not from guilt, from recognition. That house had never really sheltered me. I had sheltered it, and now it was crumbling without my support. I stood there for a long time, the autumn wind brushing against my face. I thought about walking up to the porch, about touching the doorframe one last time. But I stayed on the sidewalk. I did not need to step closer to know what had collapsed inside. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. My father, then my mother, then Noah. I pulled the phone from my pocket, stared at the screen, and pressed mute. The messages could pile up forever. The house could fall to dust. Their story could twist until I was unrecognizable. None of it mattered anymore, because I had finally seen the truth, scrawled in my own forged signature. And the truth was this, I did not owe them anything. Not money, not forgiveness, not even an explanation. When I reached the corner of the street, I stopped and looked back one last time. The house stood silent, its windows dark. I whispered a goodbye, not to the building, not to them, but to the version of myself that had once believed sacrifice was the same as love. Then I turned away and walked into the night. The collapse did not arrive with a bang. It came with papers, with signs hammered into yards, with whispers that spread faster than wildfire. It came in notices taped to doors, in emails from the county, in the way neighbors slowed their cars as they passed the Washington house. The foreclosure was official now. The property listed. The bank no longer sending warnings but deadlines. The house I had once kept alive was on borrowed time, and this time there was no rescue coming. I watched from a distance, scrolling through the county website where the information was public, the digits cold and merciless. Arrears, liens, auction date pending. It felt strange, almost surreal, to see the home I grew up in reduced to numbers and abbreviations. My parents tried to keep up appearances at first. My mother posted photos of her garden, captions about resilience, about how storms made roots stronger. My father wrote about perseverance, about how family could withstand anything. But their smiles in those photos looked tight, their eyes haunted. Soon, even the facade began to crack. Posts turned darker, more desperate. A photo of the porch with the words, "We gave everything, but sometimes even everything is not enough." Another, "Some children only understand sacrifice when it is too late." Each one tagged me, like an arrow shot across the internet. Each one drew sympathy from friends, relatives, acquaintances who saw only the curated version of events. The comments piled up. "Stay strong, you raised them right, it is not your fault." And then Noah, always ready to seize the spotlight, added his lines, "I will do whatever I can to keep mom and dad safe. I wish my sister saw family the same way I do." The lies burned, but they no longer broke me. I had grown numb to the chorus. What hurt more were the quiet betrayals, the silence from those who once claimed to know me. Rachel, my cousin, who had once called me the glue of the family, never reached out. An old friend from high school who had been at my side during prom liked one of my father's bitter posts. Even people from my workplace began to hint they had seen things online. Nothing direct, but a shift in tone, a question in their eyes. The story was spreading beyond the family now, staining the edges of my other life. Then came the night my parents showed up again. Not at my apartment, not at my office, but at a restaurant where I was having dinner with friends. I saw them through the window before they spotted me, my father stiff as ever, my mother wringing her hands, Noah trailing behind with that restless shuffle. When they did see me, my mother's face lit up with urgency. She hurried forward, waving, calling my name across the room. Heads turned. Conversations paused. My father followed, his voice rising. "You cannot keep ignoring us. You are destroying this family." The entire restaurant was watching. My friends stared at me, wide-eyed. I felt the heat of humiliation crawl up my neck, but underneath it was steel. I stood slowly, placed my napkin on the table, and faced them. "You already destroyed this family," I said quietly. "You just do not want to admit it." My father's face darkened, my mother gasped, Noah muttered something I did not catch. I walked past them without another word, out into the night air. Behind me, I heard my father's voice echoing through the restaurant. "She owes us. She owes us everything." The words followed me down the block, clinging to me like smoke. That was the moment I realized it was over. Whatever fragile ties remained between us had snapped in that public scene. They had wanted to shame me into obedience. Instead, they had revealed themselves. To me, to my friends, to anyone watching. The collapse was not just of the house now, it was of the myth we had all been living inside. After that night in the restaurant, there was no going back. Whatever mask my parents had tried to keep in place had slipped. They could still spin their story online, but anyone who had seen that scene knew the truth. They were desperate, angry, unraveling in public. Within a week, the foreclosure notice became final. A bright orange sticker was slapped onto the front window of the house, warning that the property was scheduled for auction. A "for sale" sign appeared on the lawn, staked crooked into the dying grass. The same neighbors who once asked me for advice on repairs now slowed their cars to gawk. Some shook their heads, some whispered. All of them knew. I did not go inside, I could not. I walked past once from across the street, my hood pulled low. The house looked hollowed out already, its shutters hanging, its paint peeling. The porch swing I had fixed was gone, the wind chimed silent. It was like the house itself had grown tired of carrying them. My father responded with fury, of course. He posted a long rant on Facebook, blaming the bank, the economy, even me by name. My daughter abandoned us when we needed her most. We gave her everything and she gave us nothing. Noah added fuel in the comments. I tried to stop this. I did everything I could, but you cannot force someone to care. The narrative was set. I was the villain, they were the victims. I should have cared less by then, but the truth is it still stung. Not because strangers believed them, but because somewhere deep down, I still wanted to be seen. Not for my sacrifice, not for my silence, but for who I truly was. And that was the one thing they would never grant me. The pressure from extended family reached a fever pitch. My aunt left a voicemail accusing me of cruelty. My uncle sent a text dripping with disappointment. "You may regret this for the rest of your life." Even people I barely knew messaged me to say they were praying for me, though the tone carried judgment more than compassion. I stopped answering altogether. The collapse had spread beyond finances. It was reputation. It was relationships. It was the myth of family itself. And yet I felt something unexpected in the middle of the wreckage. Relief. For so long, I had carried the house, the bills, the stories, the weight of being the strong one. Now it was all out of my hands. There was nothing left to save. The house would be sold. The debts would come due. The illusions would shatter. And I would not be the one to glue the pieces back together. A week after the auction was announced, I walked past the house one last time. The front yard was empty, the windows dark. My chest tightened as memories flooded in: birthday parties on the lawn, painting the attic walls green with Dad and Noah, Mom handing us glasses of iced tea. For a moment, I almost let myself grieve. But then I remembered the loan papers with my forged signature, the will with my name reduced to a footnote, the countless nights of exhaustion they had never noticed. The grief ebbed, replaced by something steadier. Resolve. The house had never kept me. I had kept it. And now, without me, it had fallen. That was not my failure. That was theirs. I turned away from the sight, the for sale sign creaking in the wind. Behind me, I could almost hear the house sigh, as if relieved too, finally freed from the weight of all our lies. The collapse was complete, and in its ruins, I found the first fragile taste of freedom. The day the house was auctioned, I did not go. I stayed in my apartment, the curtains half drawn, a cup of coffee cooling on the counter. I imagined strangers walking through the rooms, their voices echoing off walls that had once carried the weight of my childhood. I pictured the kitchen, the scuffed floors, the faint scent of lemon polish my mother always used. I wondered if the new owners would paint over the memories, scrub the house clean of us. The thought did not hurt the way I expected it to. It felt almost merciful. Let the walls forget. Let the echoes fade. Life settled into a strange rhythm after that. My parents moved in with one of my uncles. Noah disappeared from social media for a while, then resurfaced posting photos of nights out, drinks in hand, the same restless grin as always. The narrative shifted too. Instead of blaming me daily, they began to speak more vaguely, folding the story into something they could live with: tough times, unfair systems, a daughter who lost her way. But by then, their words had lost their grip on me. I had seen the truth too clearly. One evening, weeks later, I found myself walking through the old neighborhood. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp leaves. The sun was low, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Without planning it, my feet carried me to the house. It stood quiet, a for sale sticker still plastered across the sign in the yard. The lawn was wild, the hedges untrimmed. The porch light was broken, yet something about the silence felt peaceful, like the house itself was finally resting after years of strain. I stood across the street, watching. My reflection flickered faintly in the dark window panes. I thought about the girl I had been inside those walls, the girl who taped up her father's medical bills so he would not worry, who covered Noah's late fees, who believed every sacrifice would earn her love in return. I thought about the woman who discovered the will, who realized she was not even a footnote in her family's future. I thought about the signature stolen from her, the last thread of trust snapped. And then I thought about myself now, standing here, no longer carrying them, no longer bound. For the first time, I felt light. Not happy exactly, not triumphant, but free. I whispered goodbye, not to the house, not even to them, but to the version of me who had lived for their approval, who had mistaken self-erasure for love. She was gone now, and in her place stood someone new. Someone who understood that strength was not sacrifice, but boundaries. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. I turned away, my shadow stretching long across the pavement. Ahead, the street curved into the fading light. I followed it. The next weeks moved quietly, almost gently, like life itself was giving me space to breathe. I woke early, brewed coffee without rushing, and for the first time in years, I let myself sit at the window just to watch the city stir awake. There were no emergency phone calls, no desperate emails, no sudden withdrawals from my account to cover someone else's failure. The silence was not emptiness, it was possibility. I began doing small things for myself, things I had always postponed. I signed up for a ceramics class on Saturday mornings. My hands, used to typing in spreadsheets, grew accustomed to clay, to shaping something fragile into something whole. I went hiking with coworkers, laughing more than I expected. I even allowed myself to dream again, about graduate school, about traveling, about a future built not on obligations but on choice. Sometimes guilt tried to creep back in. At night, when the city quieted, I would think of my mother's tired eyes, of my father's voice trembling with anger that was really fear. I would wonder if I had abandoned them too completely. But then I would remember the loan papers, the will, the endless years of silent expectation. Love was not supposed to feel like theft. One evening, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was my mother's. Inside was a single page. No accusations, no manipulation. Just a few lines. We are staying with Uncle James for now. The house is gone. I do not know what the future looks like. I hope you are safe. I read it twice. The words carried neither apology nor blame, just a quiet acknowledgement of reality. It was the closest thing to peace we had shared in years. I did not write back. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Some silences are necessary. Spring came, and with it, a sense of renewal. Trees bloomed along the sidewalks, their petals scattering in the breeze like confetti. I walked beneath them one afternoon, sunlight warming my face, and realized that for the first time in a long time, I was not bracing myself for the next demand, the next crisis. I was simply living. The past was not erased. The betrayals would never vanish. But they no longer define me. They were chapters closed, lessons carved into stone, and beyond them stretched something wider, brighter mine. One Sunday evening, I returned to the old neighborhood one last time. The house had been sold now. A new family lived there, children's toys scattered across the lawn, laughter drifting from the porch. The sight did not sting. It soothed. The house had found new keepers, ones who might fill it with joy instead of debt, trust instead of silence. I stood across the street, hands in my pockets, and smiled. The cycle was broken. Turning away, I walked back toward the setting sun, each step lighter than the one before. The future stretched open ahead of me, not a burden, not a cage, but a road of my own making. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free.